Stop resisting! You look suspicious!
Get your hands off me!
I didn't do anything.
Know your place. We got a call about you. Stop resisting!
I'm not resisting. What did I do? Please, just tell me what I did.
Get your hands off me. I didn't do anything. The security officers slammed 17-year-old Marcus Washington against the cold marble floor of Dallas International Airport's Terminal C. His backpack skidded across the polished surface, spilling textbooks and a laptop onto the ground. Around him, travelers stopped mid-stride, phones already raised, recording everything. "Stop resisting," Officer Brent Caldwell barked, pressing his knee into Marcus's back with unnecessary force. The teenager's cheek pressed against the floor, his glasses knocked askew, one lens cracked from the impact. Marcus's voice cracked with confusion and fear. "I'm not resisting. What did I do? Please just tell me what I did." A small crowd had begun to form, a semicircle of horrified onlookers maintaining a cautious distance. Some whispered to each other. Others filmed silently, their expressions ranging from shock to grim recognition, as if they'd seen this scene play out before in different airports, different cities, different lives cut short by assumptions. Officer Caldwell's partner, a younger man with a nervous energy named Officer James Pritchard, grabbed Marcus's wrists and yanked them behind his back. The metal handcuffs clicked into place, too tight, biting into the boy's skin. "We got a call about a suspicious individual matching your description," Caldwell said, his tone clipped and official, as if reading from a script he'd memorized long ago. "Loitering near gate C-14, possibly casing passengers for theft." "Loitering?" Marcus's voice rose in disbelief despite his vulnerable position. "I was sitting at my gate. My flight doesn't leave for another hour. This is insane." The teen tried to turn his head to look at the officers, but Caldwell applied more pressure, keeping him pinned. Marcus's breathing became shallow, panicked. His heart hammered against the floor beneath him. An elderly white woman in the crowd gasped audibly. "That seems excessive," she murmured to her companion, but neither moved to intervene. A black businessman in an expensive suit had his phone out, recording from multiple angles. His jaw was set tight, his eyes burning with a familiar rage tempered by bitter experience. Marcus's mind raced. He'd been sitting quietly at his gate, reviewing notes for his upcoming MIT orientation. He'd been accepted early admission to study aerospace engineering, a dream he'd worked toward since building his first model rocket in 6th grade. He was supposed to fly to Boston in 55 minutes. His mother had kissed his forehead that morning, tears in her eyes, so proud her baby was the first in their family to attend an Ivy League school. Now he was face down on an airport floor being treated like a criminal, and he didn't even know why. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below, and if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Marcus Washington had grown up in South Dallas, in a neighborhood where helicopters circled more often than birds, and where the sound of sirens was as common as church bells on Sunday mornings. His mother, Diane Washington, worked double shifts as a nurse at Parkland Hospital, often coming home so exhausted, she'd fall asleep in her scrubs on the worn couch in their small living room. His father had died when Marcus was 8, a heart attack at 42, brought on by years of stress and undiagnosed hypertension. Marcus remembered his father's calloused hands, roughened by decades of construction work, and the way he'd ruffle Marcus's hair and tell him, "You're going to be something special, son. Something I never got the chance to be." Those words had become Marcus's North Star. He'd thrown himself into his studies with a ferocity that concerned his mother at first. While other kids in the neighborhood played basketball until the streetlights came on, Marcus was in the library, devouring books on physics, mathematics, engineering. His teachers noticed quickly. By middle school, he was taking high school courses. By high school, he was enrolled in college-level classes at the local community college, riding 2 buses each way to get there. His guidance counselor, Mrs. Patricia Chen, an Asian-American woman who'd grown up in similar circumstances, had taken Marcus under her wing. She'd helped him navigate the labyrinthine world of college applications, scholarship essays, and standardized tests. She'd written him a recommendation letter so glowing that Marcus had cried when she'd let him read it. "You're not just smart, Marcus," she'd told him in her cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and motivational posters. "You're resilient, you're determined, and you're going to change the world." Marcus had 2 best friends, Jamal Rodriguez, whose mother was Dominican and whose father was black, and Keisha Thompson, whose sharp wit and sharper mind made her the most formidable debater Marcus had ever met. The three of them had been inseparable since freshman year, a tight-knit trio who'd survived AP classes, SAT prep, and the daily indignities of being brilliant black and brown kids in a school system that too often expected less of them. They'd all gotten into good schools. Jamal was headed to Stanford for computer science. Keisha had a full ride to Howard for pre-law. They'd celebrated together at Keisha's house 3 months ago, their parents beaming with pride, taking photos, already planning visits. Marcus had thought the hard part was over. He'd thought he'd made it. He'd been wrong. The morning had started normally enough. His mother had driven him to the airport, both of them too emotional to say much. She'd hugged him tight in the departure area, whispering prayers and advice in his ear. "Keep your head down, baby. Be respectful. Call me when you land. I love you so much." He'd checked in, gone through security without incident, and found his gate. He'd settled into a seat near the window, pulling out his laptop to review the orientation materials MIT had sent him. Around him, the terminal buzzed with the usual airport energy, families rushing to catch flights, business travelers typing furiously on tablets, couples saying goodbye with lingering kisses. Marcus had been so absorbed in his reading that he hadn't noticed the first time someone looked at him suspiciously, or the second, or the third, but security had noticed him. And now here he was, face down on the cold airport floor, his MIT orientation materials scattered around him like broken dreams, while strangers filmed his humiliation, and officers treated him like a threat instead of a kid about to start the most important chapter of his life. The weight on his back didn't ease. If anything, it increased. Officer Caldwell hauled Marcus to his feet with rough efficiency, keeping the handcuffs painfully tight. The teenager stumbled, his legs shaky from adrenaline and fear. His cracked glasses sat crooked on his face, making everything slightly blurred and distorted. "Move," Caldwell ordered, pushing Marcus forward. "Where are you taking me?" Marcus asked, his voice steadier now, though terror still coursed through his veins. "I have a right to know what I'm being charged with." "You'll find out at the security office," Pritchard said, his tone slightly less aggressive than his partner's, but still cold, detached, professional in the worst way possible. As they marched Marcus through the terminal, more people stopped to stare. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked away quickly, uncomfortable with witnessing injustice but unwilling to involve themselves. A few looked satisfied, as if Marcus's treatment confirmed some ugly assumption they'd already made about him. Marcus's mind raced through everything his mother had ever taught him about interactions with police. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. Be polite. Say yes, sir, and no, sir. Don't give them any excuse. He'd followed every rule. He'd been sitting quietly at his gate, bothering no one, threatening no one, existing while black and young and male in a space where apparently that was enough to be deemed suspicious. "There's been a mistake," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm, reasonable, non-threatening. "I'm a student. I'm flying to Boston for MIT orientation. My flight leaves in 45 minutes. You can check my boarding pass. It's in my backpack. You can call the school. You can verify everything." "We'll verify everything at the office," Caldwell said flatly. They turned down a corridor away from the main terminal, the crowd thinning. Marcus felt his panic rising. The fewer witnesses, the worse this could get. He'd seen the videos. He knew the statistics. He knew that black boys his age didn't always make it home from encounters like this. "Please," he said, hating the desperation in his voice but unable to suppress it. "Please just check my ID, check my boarding pass. I can prove who I am. I can prove I belong here." "You can prove it at the office," Pritchard repeated. They passed a janitor, an elderly black man who looked at Marcus with eyes full of sorrow and recognition. The man opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it, his shoulders sagging. He'd seen this before. He knew he was powerless to stop it. Marcus thought of his mother, probably at work by now, tending to patients, saving lives, having no idea that her son's life might be in danger. He thought of Jamal and Keisha, probably on their planes by now or already at their schools, excited and nervous and free. He thought of his father, gone for 9 years now, and wondered what he would do in this moment. The security office loomed ahead, a nondescript door marked airport security personnel only. Caldwell pushed the door open and shoved Marcus inside. The room was small, windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly and pale. A metal desk sat in the center, surrounded by filing cabinets and a wall of security monitors showing different views of the terminal. A coffee maker in the corner emitted a burnt smell. The walls were bare except for a poster about TSA regulations and a calendar from 2023 that no one had bothered to replace. "Sit," Caldwell ordered, pointing to a metal chair bolted to the floor. Marcus sat awkwardly, his hands still cuffed behind his back. The position was uncomfortable, forcing him to lean forward to maintain balance. Pritchard began gathering Marcus's belongings, his backpack, his laptop, his phone, his wallet. He dumped everything onto the desk and started rifling through it with rough, careless hands. "You got a warrant to search my stuff?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking slightly despite his attempt at bravery. "We don't need a warrant," Caldwell said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Airport security has broad authority to search individuals and their belongings when there's reasonable suspicion of criminal activity." "What criminal activity?" Marcus demanded, his frustration finally breaking through his fear. "Sitting at my gate, reading my laptop, being black in an airport, which one of those is criminal?" Caldwell's expression hardened. "Watch your tone, son." "I'm not your son," Marcus said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Pritchard pulled out Marcus's wallet and opened it, examining his driver's license, his student ID, his debit card. His expression flickered with something, uncertainty, recognition, but he quickly masked it. "MIT," Pritchard said, looking at the student ID. "You're saying you're going to MIT?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "I was accepted early admission. I'm flying to Boston for orientation. Like I've been trying to tell you." Caldwell leaned down, bringing his face close to Marcus's. "We've had problems with kids like you pretending to be students, using fake IDs, running scams in airports. Targeting tourists, stealing from travelers. You think we're stupid?" "Kids like me?" Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "What exactly do you mean by that, Officer Caldwell?" The name tag on the officer's uniform glinted under the fluorescent lights. Caldwell didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. He straightened up and turned to his partner. "Run a background check. Let's see what comes up." Pritchard moved to the computer on the desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Marcus watched him work, his heart pounding. He had no criminal record. He'd never even gotten a detention in school. His record was spotless. Honor roll every semester, National Merit Scholar, volunteer work at the community center, youth mentor at his church. But he also knew that didn't always matter. He'd read too many stories about innocent people caught up in systems designed to presume their guilt. The minutes ticked by in oppressive silence. Marcus's shoulders ached from the position of his arms. His wrists throbbed where the handcuffs bit into his skin. His cracked glasses kept sliding down his nose, and he couldn't push them back up. Finally, Pritchard looked up from the computer. "He's clean," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "No record, not even a traffic ticket." Caldwell frowned. "Check again." "I already checked twice." "Then check the name against known aliases. Check variations of the spelling." Marcus closed his eyes, a wave of exhaustion and despair washing over him. It didn't matter that he was innocent. It didn't matter that he had no record. They were determined to find something, anything, to justify what they'd already done. This was the trap. This was the system working exactly as designed. While Pritchard ran more searches, desperately trying to find something that would validate their initial suspicions, neither officer noticed the commotion beginning outside in the terminal. The black businessman who'd been filming the initial takedown had posted the video to Twitter with the caption, "Dallas International Airport security violently tackled a black teenager for looking suspicious while sitting at his gate. He was on his way to MIT. This is America in 2024. Justice for Marcus." Within minutes, the video had been retweeted thousands of times. Comments poured in: outrage, anger, heartbreak, solidarity. People tagged news organizations, civil rights groups, elected officials. The elderly white woman who'd gasped during Marcus's arrest had called her daughter, who worked for CNN. Within 15 minutes, a producer was on the phone with the airport's public relations department, asking for comment. A group of black travelers had gathered near gate C-14, where Marcus's scattered belongings still lay on the floor. Someone had carefully collected his textbooks, his MIT acceptance letter, his orientation materials. They held an impromptu vigil, refusing to disperse when airport staff asked them to move along. "Not until we know that boy is safe," one woman said firmly, her arms crossed over her chest. "Not until we know he's being treated fairly." And in Terminal B, having just arrived on a flight from Washington, D.C., Senator Patricia Washington was checking her phone while walking toward the baggage claim. She saw the trending hashtag, she clicked the video, and she froze in the middle of the terminal, her blood running cold, her hands beginning to shake. Because the face pressed against that airport floor, terrified and confused and trying so hard to be brave, belonged to her nephew. Her baby brother's only son, Marcus. In the security office, Marcus had stopped trying to reason with the officers. Caldwell had made it clear that nothing Marcus said would change his mind. The officer had decided Marcus was guilty of something, and now he was working backward to find evidence to support that conclusion. This wasn't justice. This was persecution dressed up in a uniform and a badge. Marcus thought about all the conversations he'd had with his mother about moments like this. She'd prepared him as best she could, teaching him how to survive interactions with police, how to minimize the danger, how to make it home alive. But she'd never been able to hide the fear in her eyes when she talked about it, the terror every black mother felt when her son left the house. He thought about the other black boys and men who hadn't made it home. Their names scrolled through his mind like a tragic roll call: Tamir Rice, 12 years old, playing with a toy gun. Philando Castile, shot during a traffic stop while reaching for his license. Elijah McClain, walking home from the store, who told the officers, "I'm just different," before they killed him. Marcus was 17, about to start his dream education, full of potential and promise and hope. Would he become another name on that list? Another hashtag? Another reason for his community to grieve? "Please," he said one more time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please just call MIT, call my mother. Call someone who can verify who I am." Caldwell turned to look at him, and for a brief moment, something almost human flickered across his face. Doubt, regret, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold, bureaucratic mask of authority that refused to admit error. "We'll make our calls when we're ready," Caldwell said. The door to the security office suddenly burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Senator Patricia Washington stood in the doorway, her chest heaving with exertion from running through the terminal, her designer suit slightly disheveled, her usually immaculate appearance disrupted by urgency and rage. Behind her stood 2 Capitol Police officers assigned to her protection detail, both looking grim and ready for trouble. "Where is my nephew?" Senator Washington's voice filled the small room like thunder, commanding and powerful and absolutely terrifying in its controlled fury. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock and confusion through his cracked lenses. Caldwell and Pritchard stared at the woman in the doorway, their faces showing various stages of dawning horror as they began to process exactly who was standing before them. "Your nephew?" Pritchard stammered. Senator Washington's eyes found Marcus, taking in his handcuffed position, his cracked glasses, the fear and exhaustion on his face. Her expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: relief that he was alive, rage at his treatment, and a cold, calculating anger that promised severe consequences. "Marcus Washington," she said, her voice softening only slightly as she addressed him directly. "Are you hurt?" "Aunt Patricia," Marcus's voice cracked. He hadn't seen his aunt in 6 months, hadn't even known she was in Dallas. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "I'll explain everything in a moment," she said, then turned her attention back to the officers. Her voice dropped to a deadly quiet register that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "I asked my nephew a question. Before I deal with you two, I need to know if he's injured." "Marcus, are you hurt?" "My wrists," Marcus admitted. "The handcuffs are too tight, and they cracked my glasses when they threw me to the ground." Senator Washington's jaw clenched. She turned to one of her Capitol Police officers. "Document everything. Photos of his wrists, his glasses, his positioning. I want a complete record." "Yes, ma'am," the officer said, immediately pulling out his phone and beginning to photograph Marcus from multiple angles. Caldwell found his voice, though it came out far less confident than before. "Senator Washington, with all due respect, we were responding to a call about suspicious activity." "Suspicious activity," she repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. "My 17-year-old nephew, sitting at his gate waiting for his flight to MIT orientation, constitutes suspicious activity. Please, Officer Caldwell," her eyes flicked to his name tag, "enlighten me about what exactly was suspicious. I'm genuinely curious." Pritchard stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "We received a complaint from a passenger." "What passenger?" Senator Washington cut him off. Name, gate number, time of complaint. I want every single detail, and I want the security footage from every camera in this terminal pulled immediately. All of it, Terminal C, this office, every second of my nephew's treatment. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I'm also calling the airport director, the head of TSA for this region, and she paused, looking up at the officers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I believe we're due for another hearing on racial profiling in transportation security. Your department should start preparing testimony. Caldwell's face had gone pale. Pritchard looked like he might be sick. But what happened next changed everything. Within 30 minutes of Senator Washington's arrival at the airport security office, the small, windowless room had transformed into something resembling a command center in the midst of a full-blown crisis. 3 more people had arrived. Dallas International Airport's Director of Operations, Margaret Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past half hour. The Regional Director of TSA, Malcolm Foster, a tall black man whose expression suggested he was both furious and unsurprised by what he'd walked into. And the airport's head legal counsel, David Greenbaum, who'd arrived clutching a briefcase and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Marcus had finally been released from the handcuffs. A paramedic had been called to examine and photograph the deep red marks and minor lacerations on his wrists where the metal had cut into his skin. His cracked glasses had been carefully bagged as evidence. Senator Washington had given him her reading glasses temporarily, though they weren't the right prescription and made everything slightly blurry in a different way. He sat in a different chair now, one that hadn't been bolted to the floor, with a bottle of water and a blanket someone had brought him even though he insisted he wasn't cold. His aunt stood beside him, one hand resting protectively on his shoulder. Officer Caldwell and Officer Pritchard stood against the far wall, looking like defendants awaiting sentencing. 2 internal affairs investigators from the airport police department had also arrived and were conducting interviews separately. Director Chen was the first to address the room, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Senator Washington, on behalf of Dallas International Airport, I want to first express our deepest apologies for this incident. What happened to your nephew is absolutely unacceptable and does not represent the values of this airport or our security protocols. Your apologies mean nothing, Senator Washington said flatly. Not to me and certainly not to Marcus. Words are cheap. I want answers and I want them now, starting with the passenger complaint that allegedly triggered this incident. Where is it? Malcolm Foster, the TSA director, stepped forward. We've been reviewing the security logs and radio communications from this afternoon. The initial call came in at 2:17 p.m. from Officer Caldwell, reporting suspicious behavior near Gate C-14. Wait, Senator Washington held up her hand. You're telling me the call originated with Officer Caldwell, not from a passenger complaint? Foster's expression grew even more severe. That's correct. There was no passenger complaint. Officer Caldwell initiated the contact based on his own observations. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Senator Washington turned slowly to look at Officer Caldwell, her eyes blazing with cold fury. Officer Caldwell, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. You lied. You told my nephew, you told me that you were responding to a passenger complaint. You lied to justify your actions. Would you care to explain why? Caldwell's face flushed red. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Senator, in the moment I believed the situation warranted. In the moment, she cut him off, you saw a young black man sitting at his gate and decided he was suspicious. Then, when questioned, you fabricated a passenger complaint to justify your racial profiling. And now you're standing here trying to explain away a lie that you told while my nephew was handcuffed and terrified on the floor of your office. David Greenbaum, the airport's legal counsel, looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. He made a small gesture toward Caldwell, a silent plea to stop talking, but the officer either didn't see it or chose to ignore it. Senator, with respect, we have protocols for identifying potential security threats, Caldwell began. Do not, Senator Washington's voice rose for the first time, sharp and commanding. Do not stand there and lecture me about security protocols. I have sat on the Senate Homeland Security Committee for 6 years. I have reviewed every major piece of transportation security legislation that has come through Congress. I know exactly what your protocols are supposed to be, and I know that profiling a teenager based on the color of his skin while he sits quietly at his gate reading his laptop is not part of any legitimate security protocol. She pulled out her phone and held it up. Do you know what's happening right now, Officer Caldwell? There's a video of you tackling my nephew, with over 2 million views on social media. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they've all reached out to my office for comment. There are protesters gathering outside this airport right now. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus is trending #1 nationally. Your name is being shared across every platform, along with the name of this airport and this police department. She lowered the phone, her expression hardening further. You've created a national incident. And for what? Because a brilliant young black man had the audacity to exist in your airport. Pritchard, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up, his voice shaking. Senator, I want you to know that I had concerns during the incident. I suggested we check his ID immediately, but Officer Caldwell insisted we bring him to the office first. I'm not trying to absolve myself, but I want you to know that I didn't agree with how this was handled. Caldwell turned to his partner, betrayal written across his face. Are you serious right now? You're throwing me under the bus? I'm telling the truth, Pritchard said, looking miserable but resolute, which is what we should have been doing from the start. Senator Washington held up her hand, stopping the argument before it could escalate. Gentlemen, you can fight about this later. Right now, I want to know exactly what happened, minute by minute, from the moment Officer Caldwell first noticed my nephew. Malcolm Foster pulled out a tablet, pulling up security footage. We have the complete incident on camera from multiple angles. Would you like to review it? Yes, Senator Washington said immediately. Play it. All of it, for the next 15 minutes. The room watched in horrifying silence as the incident unfolded on screen. The footage showed Marcus sitting peacefully at gate C-14, his laptop open, completely absorbed in whatever he was reading. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m. At 2:17 p.m., Officer Caldwell entered the frame, walking through the gate area. His head swiveled, scanning the crowd, and his gaze stopped on Marcus. For several seconds, he simply stared at the teenager. Then he spoke into his radio. The audio was silent on the security footage, but a separate recording of the radio traffic played simultaneously. Caldwell's voice came through clearly. This is Officer Caldwell at gate C-14. I've got a suspicious individual, black male, late teens, loitering in the gate area. Advise backup. The dispatcher's voice responded, Copy that. What's the nature of the suspicious behavior? There was a pause. He's been sitting here for a while, keeps looking around, looks nervous. On the security footage, Marcus never looked up from his laptop. He didn't look around nervously. He didn't exhibit any of the behaviors Caldwell had described. Senator Washington's hand tightened on Marcus's shoulder. The video continued. Pritchard arrived at 2:20 p.m. The two officers approached Marcus. The footage clearly showed the moment of first contact. Marcus looking up, confused, as Caldwell demanded to see his ID. Then Marcus reaching slowly for his backpack, his movements careful and non-threatening. And then Caldwell grabbing him, spinning him around, forcing him to the ground with violent efficiency while Marcus's voice, picked up by nearby airport audio, cried out in confusion and fear. When the footage ended, the silence in the room was absolute. Director Chen broke it first, her voice hollow. Officer Caldwell, you're suspended immediately, effective now. Turn in your badge and weapon. You'll be escorted from the premises. What about Pritchard? Senator Washington asked. Foster looked at the younger officer, his expression thoughtful. Officer Pritchard, you're also suspended pending a complete investigation. However, your cooperation will be noted in our report. Pritchard nodded, looking relieved and ashamed in equal measure. He removed his badge slowly, handing it to Foster. Caldwell, however, wasn't done. His face had gone from red to purple, his humiliation and anger boiling over. This is ridiculous. I was doing my job. You're going to crucify me because some senator's nephew. Stop talking, David Greenbaum interrupted sharply. Officer Caldwell, as your legal counsel, I'm advising you to stop talking immediately. But Caldwell was past the point of listening to advice. Months of unchecked behavior, of minor incidents that had been overlooked or explained away, of a system that had protected him instead of holding him accountable, had convinced him that he was untouchable. No, he said, his voice rising. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of being told I can't do my job because of political correctness. I saw someone who looked suspicious and I acted. That's what we're trained to do. If people don't like it, if they don't want to be questioned or searched, maybe they should act less suspicious. Marcus spoke for the first time since the video had ended, his voice quiet but steady. "I was reading about orbital mechanics. I was preparing for my classes at MIT. I was sitting at my gate, waiting for my flight, exactly like hundreds of other passengers in this airport today. The only thing suspicious about me, Officer Caldwell, was the color of my skin." "That's not," Caldwell started. "Yes, it is," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his own boldness. His fear had transformed into something else, anger, yes, but also clarity. "You saw a black teenager and assumed I was a threat. You didn't see my MIT ID. You didn't see my boarding pass. You didn't see my textbooks or my acceptance letter or any of the evidence that might have told you who I actually am. You saw my skin color, and you made a decision based on that alone." He stood up, his legs steadier now, his voice growing stronger. "I've worked my entire life to get to this moment. I've studied when other kids were playing. I've sacrificed and pushed myself and exceeded every expectation anyone ever had for me. My mother works double shifts to support our family. My father died when I was 8 years old, but I carry his dreams with me every single day. I earned my place at MIT. I earned my seat on that plane. And you," he pointed at Caldwell, "you tried to take all of that away from me because you couldn't see past your own prejudices." Tears glistened in Marcus's eyes, but his voice didn't waver. "How many other kids like me have you done this to? How many other black boys have you profiled and harassed and traumatized? How many dreams have you damaged because you see threats instead of people?" The room remained frozen in the aftermath of Marcus's words. Senator Washington's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. Director Chen looked stricken. Even Malcolm Foster, who had undoubtedly witnessed countless instances of racial profiling in his career, seemed shaken by the raw honesty in the teenager's voice. Officer Caldwell opened his mouth to respond, but whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips when Senator Washington stepped forward, positioning herself between him and Marcus in a gesture that was both protective and confrontational. "Let me tell you about my nephew, Officer Caldwell," she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of advocacy and lived experience. "Marcus Washington is a National Merit Scholar. He graduated third in his class from a high school where the graduation rate is barely 50%. He's published 2 papers on sustainable energy systems in peer-reviewed journals. He volunteers at his community center teaching coding to elementary school kids. He's a youth mentor at his church. He's been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship to study aerospace engineering." She paused, letting each achievement sink in. "But even if he weren't any of those things, even if he were just a regular kid waiting for his flight with average grades and no special accomplishments, he would still deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Because that's what human beings deserve, Officer Caldwell. That's what our Constitution guarantees. That's what our laws demand." Senator Washington pulled out her phone again, scrolling through something before turning the screen to face Caldwell. "Do you know what I'm looking at right now? Your personnel file, which I was able to access through official channels in the last 30 minutes. Would you like to know what I found?" Caldwell's face went pale. "In the past 3 years, you've had 12 complaints filed against you for excessive force or racial profiling. 12. 8 were dismissed due to lack of evidence. 2 resulted in mandatory retraining. 2 are still under investigation. Your supervisors have noted in your evaluations that you tend to be overzealous and that you struggle with de-escalation techniques. One supervisor even recommended you be reassigned to non-public facing duties, but that recommendation was overridden by your union representative." She lowered the phone, her expression a mixture of disgust and exhaustion. "You know what else I found? 5 commendations for arrests and seizures in airport security. 5 moments where your department praised you for catching someone doing something illegal. And I'm willing to bet that if I dug deeper into those cases, I'd find a pattern. A pattern of you targeting people who looked a certain way, acted a certain way, came from certain communities. Am I wrong?" Caldwell said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Malcolm Foster stepped forward, his expression grave. "Senator Washington, I want to assure you that we will be conducting a comprehensive review not just of this incident, but of Officer Caldwell's entire record. We'll be examining every arrest, every stop, every interaction he's had with passengers over the course of his employment. If there are patterns of discrimination or misconduct, they will be addressed." "And Officer Pritchard?" Senator Washington asked, turning her attention to the younger officer who looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. "Ma'am," Pritchard spoke up, his voice hoarse. "I know I can't undo what happened. I should have spoken up immediately. I should have insisted we check Marcus's ID at the gate. I should have refused to participate in something I knew was wrong. He took a shaky breath. I was scared of contradicting my senior officer. I was scared of being labeled difficult or uncooperative. But my fear doesn't excuse my actions. I participated in traumatizing an innocent kid, and I'll have to live with that. Senator Washington studied him for a long moment. Officer Pritchard, fear is understandable. We all experience it. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite your fear. You failed Marcus today. The question is whether you'll learn from this failure or whether you'll become another Officer Caldwell in a few years. She turned to Foster. I want Officer Pritchard to complete a comprehensive training program on implicit bias, de-escalation, and civil rights. I want him working with community organizations, particularly in Black and brown neighborhoods. I want him to understand the lived experiences of the people he's meant to protect and serve. And I want regular evaluations to ensure he's actually learning and growing, not just going through the motions. Consider it done, Foster said immediately. As for Officer Caldwell, Senator Washington continued, her voice hardening again, suspension is not enough. I want him terminated. I want his law enforcement certification reviewed. And I want a full investigation into every case he's ever worked on. If innocent people have been arrested or charged because of his racial profiling, I want those cases reopened and reviewed. David Greenbaum, the legal counsel, cleared his throat nervously. Senator, while we absolutely support a thorough investigation, termination procedures require due process. Officer Caldwell has union representation and certain procedural rights. I'm aware of the procedures, Senator Washington cut him off. And I'm also aware that my nephew has rights too. The right to not be assaulted by law enforcement, the right to equal protection under the law, the right to be free from discrimination based on the color of his skin. Those rights were violated today, violently and publicly, by an officer with a documented history of similar behavior. So yes, follow your procedures. Involve the union, go through every step of due process, but understand that I will be monitoring this situation personally. I will be following up weekly. And if I find that this department is more interested in protecting bad officers than in protecting innocent passengers, I will use every tool at my disposal to force change. She pulled out a business card and handed it to Director Chen. This is my Chief of Staff's direct line. She'll be your primary point of contact. I expect regular updates on the investigation and on the policy changes this incident should trigger. Director Chen took the card with trembling hands. Senator, I promise you, we take this extremely seriously. We will, I don't want promises, Senator Washington interrupted. I want action, I want concrete policy changes. I want mandatory training for every security officer in this airport on racial bias and cultural sensitivity. I want a clear complaint process that's accessible to passengers who experience discrimination. I want community oversight and accountability measures. I want data collection and public reporting on stops, searches, and arrests broken down by race and ethnicity. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Look, Director Chen, I know you inherited a system with deep problems. I'm not holding you personally responsible for decades of institutional racism, but I am holding you responsible for what happens next. This is your moment to lead. This is your opportunity to transform this airport's security culture from one that profiles and punishes to one that protects and serves. Don't waste it. Director Chen nodded, looking both overwhelmed and determined. I won't, Senator. You have my word. As the meeting began to wind down and various officials started leaving to handle different aspects of the crisis, media responses, policy reviews, legal consultations, Senator Washington finally turned her full attention to Marcus. She cupped his face gently in her hands, examining him the way she used to when he was small and would visit her in Washington during summer breaks. How are you really doing? She asked quietly, her public persona dropping away to reveal the aunt who'd taught him to ride a bike, who'd taken him to his first Smithsonian museum, who'd cried at his high school graduation. Marcus felt the adrenaline that had been sustaining him suddenly drain away, leaving him exhausted and shaky. I don't know, he admitted. I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm relieved. I'm confused, I'm all of it at once. Senator Washington pulled him into a hug, and Marcus let himself be 17 again, just for a moment, letting his aunt hold him the way his mother would have if she'd been there. I'm so sorry this happened to you, she whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you from this. You saved me, Marcus said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. If you hadn't shown up when you did. Don't, she stopped him. Don't think about what might have happened. You're safe now. That's what matters. They pulled apart, and Senator Washington wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. We need to call your mother. She's probably worried sick. Marcus's eyes widened. Oh God, Mom, she's probably at work. She can't have her phone on the floor. She doesn't know about any of this. I'll call the hospital directly, Senator Washington said, already pulling out her phone. They can get her a message to call you right away. While his aunt made the call, Marcus looked around the security office that had been his prison less than an hour ago. The room looked different now, somehow smaller, less threatening. The monitors that had seemed ominous earlier just showed ordinary people going about their travel, unaware of the drama that had unfolded in this small, windowless space. Officer Caldwell had been escorted out by Internal Affairs, but Officer Pritchard remained, sitting in a chair in the corner, his head in his hands. Marcus looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide how he felt about the officer who'd helped handcuff him, but who'd also tried, in his inadequate way, to voice concerns. Finally, Marcus walked over to him. Pritchard looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I don't know if you meant what you said, Marcus told him quietly, about wanting to do better, but if you did, then actually do better. Don't just feel bad about this for a few weeks and then go back to the way things were. Actually learn, actually change, actually stand up next time even when it's hard. Pritchard nodded, his throat working. I will. I promise you, Marcus, I will. Promises are easy, Marcus said, echoing his aunt's words from earlier. Actions are what matter. Senator Washington finished her call and came over to Marcus. Your mother is on her way. She should be here in about 20 minutes. In the meantime, we need to talk about what happens next. What do you mean? Marcus asked. Media, she said simply. This story has exploded nationally. You're going to have interview requests from every major news outlet. You're going to have people wanting to hear from you, wanting to know your story. You need to decide how you want to handle that. Marcus felt a wave of panic. I don't want to be famous. I just want to go to MIT and study engineering. I know, sweetheart, Senator Washington said gently. And you will. Your flight was obviously delayed, but we'll get you to Boston as soon as possible. But right now, while the attention is on this story, you have an opportunity to speak about something that matters. You can give a voice to all the other black kids who have experienced what you experienced, but who didn't have a senator for an aunt, who didn't have the platform to demand justice. She took his hands. I'm not going to pressure you either way. If you want to stay silent, if you want to let me and others speak for you, that's completely valid. But if you want to use your voice, if you want to tell your story, I'll help you do it in a way that protects you while still creating impact. Marcus thought about all the names he'd recited to himself earlier, the black boys and men who'd died in encounters with police. He thought about his father, who taught him that the most powerful thing a person could do was stand up for what's right even when it's hard. He thought about his mother, who'd raised him to be proud of who he was, to never let anyone make him feel less than. I'll do it, he said quietly. I'll tell my story, but I want to do it right. I want people to understand that this isn't just about me. This is about a system that sees black kids as threats instead of students, as problems instead of potential. Senator Washington smiled, pride shining in her eyes. That's my nephew. Let me make some calls. We'll set up a press conference for later this evening, once your mother gets here, and we can make sure you're ready. 3 hours later, Marcus stood in front of a bank of cameras and microphones in one of the airport's conference rooms. His mother, Diane, stood on one side of him, holding his hand tightly. Senator Washington stood on his other side. Behind them stood Malcolm Foster, Director Chen, and several community leaders from Dallas's black community who'd rushed to the airport when they'd heard what happened. Marcus's cracked glasses had been replaced with a spare pair his mother had brought from home. His wrists were bandaged. He wore a clean MIT sweatshirt that his aunt had somehow acquired in the past few hours. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, and lights. Outside, protesters held signs reading Black Lives Matter and Justice for Marcus, and Stop Racial Profiling. Marcus had never spoken in front of so many people before. His hands shook as he unfolded the notes he'd written in the past hour, working with his mother and aunt to figure out what he wanted to say. But when he looked out at the crowd, he saw black faces in the audience, journalists, community members, supporters, looking at him with hope and solidarity, and his fear transformed into determination. My name is Marcus Washington, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I'm 17 years old, I'm from South Dallas, and today I was violently detained by airport security for the crime of sitting at my gate while black. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I want to be clear about what happened. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't breaking any laws. I wasn't threatening anyone. I was sitting quietly at Gate C-14 in Dallas International Airport, reading materials for my upcoming orientation at MIT, where I've been accepted to study aerospace engineering. I was excited. I was nervous. I was dreaming about my future. His voice grew stronger. And then 2 police officers approached me, demanded my ID, and before I could even fully respond, they threw me to the ground, handcuffed me, and dragged me to a security office. They lied to me, telling me they'd received a passenger complaint, when in reality, the officer who initiated contact with me had simply decided I looked suspicious based on nothing but his own biases. Marcus looked directly into the cameras. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm lucky because my aunt is a United States senator who happened to be in the same airport and saw what was happening on social media. I'm lucky because she had the power and influence to intervene, to demand answers, to ensure I was treated fairly. But what about all the other Marcus Washingtons out there? What about the black kids who don't have senators for aunts? What about the teenagers who get profiled, harassed, arrested, traumatized, and killed, and no one with power comes to save them? He could see people in the audience nodding, some with tears in their eyes. This isn't just about me, Marcus continued. This is about a system that sees black people as inherently suspicious, as threats to be neutralized rather than citizens to be protected. It's about the way black boys are denied their childhood, treated as adults and criminals from ages when white children are still considered innocent and harmless. It's about the constant fear that black parents live with, wondering if their child will make it home safely every time they leave the house. Marcus's voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. My father died when I was 8 years old. Before he died, he told me I was going to be something special. He told me to work hard, to dream big, to never let anyone make me believe I was less than I am. I've carried those words with me every day since then. I've worked harder than most people will ever work in their entire lives. I've sacrificed. I've persevered. I've exceeded every expectation. He paused, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. His mother squeezed his hand, and he felt his aunt's hand on his shoulder, grounding him. But today taught me something painful, Marcus said, his voice soft but clear. It taught me that no matter how hard I work, no matter how many achievements I rack up, no matter how many barriers I break through, there will always be people who look at me and only see a threat. People who will see my skin color before they see my intelligence, my character, my humanity. He looked down at his notes, then back up at the cameras, deciding to speak from his heart instead. I'm asking all of you watching this to imagine something. Imagine being 17 years old, about to start the most exciting chapter of your life, and having armed officers throw you to the ground for no reason. Imagine being handcuffed, humiliated, terrified, while crowds of strangers watch and record. Imagine being accused of crimes you didn't commit, having your belongings searched, your character questioned, your very right to exist in that space challenged. Imagine how that would feel. Imagine the fear. Imagine the helplessness. Imagine the rage. His voice strengthened. Now imagine that this isn't just one bad day. Imagine that this is your reality every single day. Every time you walk into a store. Every time you drive your car. Every time you exist in a space where someone with authority decides you don't belong. That's the reality for black people in America. That's the reality we're asking you to help us change. Marcus took a breath. I don't want sympathy, I don't want pity, I want justice, I want accountability, I want systemic change. I want mandatory training for law enforcement on implicit bias and de-escalation. I want community oversight of police departments. I want data collection and transparency about who gets stopped, searched, and arrested. I want consequences for officers who abuse their power and discriminate against citizens. He looked directly at the camera again. And I want everyone watching this to ask themselves, what am I doing to dismantle racism? What am I doing to challenge bias? What am I doing to create a world where black kids can sit at airport gates without fearing for their lives? Marcus folded his notes, his statement complete. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my aunt, Senator Washington, for using her platform to fight for me. Thank you to my mother, who raised me to be strong and proud and unbreakable. Thank you to everyone who's shared my story, who's demanded justice, who's standing with me right now. And to all the young black kids out there who are watching this and wondering if they'll ever be safe, if they'll ever be seen for who they truly are, I see you. I stand with you. And I promise you, we will keep fighting until this changes. The room erupted into applause. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Marcus just turned to his mother and let her pull him into a tight hug while tears streamed down both their faces. The press conference created seismic waves across the country. Marcus's speech was played on every major news network. Clips went viral on social media. Celebrities shared it. Activists praised it. Within 24 hours, Justice for Marcus had become a rallying cry for a new wave of activism around racial profiling in transportation security. But in the immediate aftermath, as the cameras were packed up and the crowds dispersed, Marcus sat in a quiet corner of the conference room with his mother and his aunt, finally allowing himself to process everything that had happened. "I'm so proud of you," Diane said, holding her son's face in her hands the way she used to when he was little. "Your father would be so proud." "I was so scared, Mom," Marcus admitted. "When they had me on the ground, when they wouldn't listen to me, I thought I might not make it home." Diane's face crumpled and she pulled him close. "I know, baby, I know. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you from this." "You did protect me," Marcus insisted. "You taught me how to survive it. You taught me to keep my hands visible, to stay calm, to not give them an excuse. You prepared me for this my whole life, even though you shouldn't have had to." Senator Washington wiped her own tears away. "Your mother called me, you know, right after she found out what happened. She was at the hospital, couldn't leave her patients, and she was beside herself with worry. She begged me to make sure you were okay. A mother shouldn't have to make that call. A mother shouldn't have to worry that her brilliant, kind, accomplished son might not survive a trip to the airport." She stood up, pacing the small space. "This is why I do what I do. This is why I fight every single day in Washington, even when it's exhausting, even when progress feels impossibly slow. Because every black mother in America knows the fear that Diane felt today. Every black child in America knows the terror that Marcus felt today. And it's not right. It's not acceptable. And we're going to change it." "How?" Marcus asked quietly. "How do we change something this big, this entrenched?" Senator Washington sat back down, taking his hand. "One policy at a time. One training program at a time. One officer held accountable at a time. One story like yours that opens people's eyes at a time. Change is slow, Marcus. It's frustrating and incremental, and sometimes it feels like we're running on a treadmill, working so hard and getting nowhere. But then something like today happens, and suddenly the nation is paying attention, and we have an opportunity to push for real reform." She pulled out her phone, showing him something. "Look at this. In the past few hours, 3 senators have signed onto my bill for enhanced oversight of transportation security. 2 major airports have announced they're implementing new anti-bias training programs. The TSA administrator has called for a national review of profiling practices. This is momentum, Marcus. This is the beginning of change." "But will it last?" Marcus asked, his cynicism born from a lifetime of seeing promises made and broken. "Or will everyone forget about this in a week when the next crisis happens?" "That's where you come in," Senator Washington said gently. "That speech you gave, that wasn't just powerful in the moment. That's going to be referenced in congressional hearings. That's going to be shown in training programs. That's going to be taught in classrooms. You've given us something tangible, something human, something that makes the abstract concept of racial profiling into a real story about a real kid with real dreams. And that's incredibly powerful." Diane spoke up, her voice hoarse from crying. "But he's still just a 17-year-old boy. He shouldn't have to carry this burden. He shouldn't have to be a symbol or a spokesperson. He should get to just be a kid going to college." "You're absolutely right," Senator Washington agreed. "And that's why, as of tomorrow, Marcus goes to MIT and starts his life. We'll handle the follow-up, the policy work, the accountability measures. Marcus has done his part. Now it's our turn to do ours." She looked at Marcus. "You get to go be brilliant now. You get to study aerospace engineering and build rockets and change the world through your work, not through trauma. You get to be 17 and then 18, and then a college student figuring out who you are and what you want to be. You've earned that, Marcus. You've more than earned it." Later that evening, Marcus finally boarded a plane to Boston. His original flight had long since departed, but the airline had rebooked him on the next available flight at no charge and upgraded him to first class. The flight attendants treated him with extraordinary kindness, bringing him extra snacks and asking if he needed anything, their eyes full of recognition and sympathy. As the plane took off, Marcus looked out the window at Dallas falling away beneath him. His city, his home. The place where he'd grown up, where he'd loved and lost, where he'd worked so hard to escape and yet would always carry with him. He thought about the day he'd had, the terror of being thrown to the ground, the humiliation of handcuffs, the fear of not knowing if he'd survive the encounter. But he also thought about the moments of grace. His aunt appearing like an avenging angel, his mother's fierce love, the support of strangers who demanded justice, the opportunity to speak his truth to the world. Next to him, his mother dozed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day. She'd insisted on accompanying him to Boston, unwilling to let him fly alone after what had happened. Senator Washington had made calls to clear her schedule, and the hospital had given her emergency leave. Marcus pulled out his laptop, the same one that had been scattered across the airport floor hours earlier. He opened the MIT orientation materials he'd been reading when Officer Caldwell had first noticed him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been studying orbital mechanics, learning about the forces that keep objects in motion and the trajectories that send them hurtling through space. His own trajectory had been violently disrupted today, but he was still in motion, still moving toward his dreams, altered perhaps by the experience, carrying new understanding of the forces that worked against him, but still reaching for the stars. He began to type, starting a new document. When I was 8 years old, my father told me I was going to be something special. Today, I learned what he really meant. He didn't just mean I would achieve great things, though I intend to. He meant that as a black boy in America, I would have to be extraordinary just to be seen as ordinary. I would have to work twice as hard to get half as far. I would have to carry the weight of prejudice and discrimination while still reaching for heights that others could pursue unencumbered. In that sense, every black person who survives and thrives in this country is something special. Every black parent who raises their child with love and hope despite, knowing the dangers that await them, is something special. Every black student who perseveres through systems designed to fail them is something special. Today reminded me that I am part of a legacy of special people. People who refused to be broken by injustice. People who demanded dignity in the face of discrimination. People who transformed their pain into power, their trauma into testimony, their struggles into strength. My father was right. I am something special. Not because of what happened to me today, but because of how I chose to respond to it. And tomorrow, I will wake up in Boston, and I will start my journey at MIT, and I will work toward building a better future, not just for myself, but for all the black kids who come after me, who deserve to sit at airport gates in peace, who deserve to dream without fear, who deserve to be seen for the fullness of who they are. This is my promise to my father. This is my promise to myself. This is my promise to every person who has ever looked at me and seen a threat instead of a gift. I will prove you wrong. I will exceed every limited expectation. I will be so extraordinary that even your prejudice can't diminish my light. And then I will reach back and pull others up with me, until the day comes when black children don't have to be extraordinary to be treated as human. When ordinary will be enough, when simply existing will no longer be an act of courage. That day is coming. I will help build it, and I will do it in my father's name. Marcus saved the document and closed his laptop. Outside his window, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, beyond Earth's orbit, the International Space Station was making its endless circuit around the planet. Astronauts of different nations, different backgrounds, working together in the void of space, proving that humanity could transcend its worst impulses when reaching for something greater. That's what Marcus wanted to build. That's what he would dedicate his life to creating. His mother stirred beside him, waking with a small gasp, her hand immediately reaching for him to confirm he was there, safe, real. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "I'm here. We're almost to Boston." She smiled at him, exhaustion and love mingling in her expression. "My MIT boy," she said, the pride in her voice making his chest tighten with emotion. "My brilliant, brave, beautiful boy." "I get it from you," Marcus said, taking her hand. "All of it. The intelligence, the courage, the refusal to give up. You taught me everything, Mom, you and Dad. He might not be here, but everything I am, everything I'm going to be, comes from both of you." Diane's eyes filled with tears again. "He would be so proud, Marcus, so impossibly proud." "I know," Marcus said. "I feel him with me. Especially today. Especially in the moments when I was scared, when I didn't know if I'd make it through. I heard his voice telling me I was something special, reminding me who I am, who we are." The plane began its descent into Boston. Below them, the city lights sparkled like earthbound stars, marking the location of Marcus's future. Somewhere down there was MIT's campus, where tomorrow he would begin his orientation, where he would study and grow and build and dream. Today had tried to break him. The system had tried to reduce him to a stereotype, to crush his spirit, to make him just another statistic in the long list of black people harmed by racial profiling. But Marcus Washington refused to be broken. He refused to let one officer's prejudice define him. He refused to let fear win. Tomorrow he would wake up in Boston. Tomorrow he would walk onto MIT's campus with his head held high. Tomorrow he would begin building the future he'd always dreamed of. And someday he would send something he'd built into space. A satellite, a rocket, a piece of technology that would orbit the Earth or journey to other worlds. And when it launched, he would think of his father, who'd told him he was something special. He would think of his mother, who'd sacrificed everything to give him this chance. He would think of his aunt, who'd used her power to save him. And he would think of all the black kids still waiting for their chance, still fighting for their dreams, still demanding to be seen and heard and valued. This was just the beginning of Marcus Washington's story, and he intended to make it extraordinary.